Hello, Facebook. I see Lorinda and Felicia just joined us. Thank you for joining us. This is our fourth Hill Country Happy Hour, and I think this is going to be probably the most entertaining group that you've had so far. We have a great group of Hill Country growers, moderated by David Kuhlken of Pedernales Cellars. These Hill Country Happy Hours are happening every week. Thursdays at 6 o'clock right here on the THCW Facebook page. So we hope that you'll join us. We have a variety of topics with different members from THCW and Texas that will join us over the weeks. So for now, I will just throw it to David and sit back and enjoy.
All right, well, thanks, January. Yeah, welcome everybody. We're, like I said, chance to talk to a number of different Hill Country growers and winemakers and kind of see where the season is. But I figured before we even kind of get into what's been going on this year, it'd be good to just kind of have everybody introduce themselves so folks know who we're talking to here, and also just give us a little bit of a background on what you grow, when you got into growing it, what your vineyards look like in terms of one or more vineyards you manage, and just kind of let us know who we are. So I'll just start actually with one of the newest here and have maybe Chase and Emily. You guys want to talk about what y'all have going on?
Yeah, I mean, my background is not grapes. I'll tell you that. That's our background, but we've just been getting into it. I mean, we planted some Italians and some babies last year, and we're planting this year. Expanding. We did about 45 acres last year, and we're at about 30 acres now, but have 20 more coming in next week. It's really just heavy Italians, I mean, I don't know if you want me to lay off the varieties because I could definitely spit those out, but you got Tremontis and, Vermentino, a whole bunch of them. But either way, we have Slate Mill down the road on Highway 16 that we're, redoing and, planting out. We have La Bonavie down the road on Easter Road on Highway 16 as well. That's where the bulk of our vineyards are. All the babies, all the road tubes, all the rebar, all the backs, just tying up all those babies.
Yeah.
Then we have our 290 property that we only have 10 acres of cab, but we plan to plant another 20, probably in 2, maybe 3 years.
Yeah.
But lots of babies, man, lots of Italians, some Rhone, but yeah, just getting going.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for folks that are, kind of, new to this, like that the La Bonavie and the Slate Mill project is a huge, awesome new project going on. They've got a lot going in the ground, a lot of really cool projects. I think as we go along, you guys can talk a little bit about some of the things and the timeline too, because it'll be fun to know when consumers can kind of see some of the wines you guys are going to be making from what you're planning, but also, of course, you'll have some new things opening up too, right? So.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously the stuff we're planting, you're talking usually 5 years before you guys can, give that a try. But so in the meantime, of course, we'll be bringing in fruit from the high plains, and Josh from William and Chris, former, he's over there leading things, and he's, right now we're drinking a Barbera that they put together. I'm drinking a Barbera, she's drinking a Papa Frenchy Mourvèdre from Randy Hester, but I would say, I mean, we just bought the Barbera at cab, and it's not, and that's going to be ready to go, bottle shot permitting, who knows, a couple months, but about to get rolling on our 18s and then, into the 19s, man. So I would say 6 months, Corona, permitting, we'll have some good new wine and bottle.
Yeah.
Some stuff that we've produced ourselves, and we've made ourselves since day, give or take one, because we had some inventory we've been dealing with and, making our blends and doing, putting our touch on it, or Josh's touch on it, so we, really soon, hopefully, and, unless some things go wrong, but hopefully not.
Cool. Mike, what about you? Mike Batek.
All right, I had to unmute David. So, Mike Batek over at High Meadow Winery, and I am drinking, let me see if I can get the label up here, our Estate Tempranillo from 2017. So I started with viticulture back in 2010. Oh, crap. And with the Texas Tech program, and worked a lot of slave labor hours at a couple of vineyards. We planted our own in 2015. We've got, and I wish I'd do it again, but Tempranillo, Montepulciano, Aglianico, Rafosco, and Negro Amaro. And if I did it again, I wouldn't put the Tempranillo in there just so I could go all Italian in the vineyard. It's kind of what I cut my teeth on when I was in high school, sneaking around trying to find wine to drink. And I just fell in love with Italian varietals back then, and that's kind of our focus. So that's my love.
Cool. Cool. Let's whichever Doug wants to speak first. Let's go to a Doug.
Go ahead, Doug Reed.
Okay. Doug Reed from Hawk Shadow. That does complicate matters, doesn't it?
Yep.
I put the vineyard in 2005. It was kind of just something to experiment. I've collected wine for about 40 years from all over the world. My background is computer engineering, so this was a completely different trip, but it's been a fun ride. If you can call slave labor in the vineyard all the time, but it is a lot of work. We have about 7.5 acres here. A lot of it is Sangiovese and Tempranillo. We do have some Tannat, a little bit of Montepulciano, and some Syrah. A couple other little experimental blocks, but anyway, that's most of what we do. It's all on 1103P, so it tolerates the high limestone a little bit better and provides some pretty growth, because we basically plant our vineyard with a rock saw. So it's a little more challenging than a lot of places. We don't ever have to worry about controlling vigor. Vigor is just not an issue here. Trying to get growth is an issue, but vigor is not a problem. So it's been an interesting ride. We do a couple of estate wines from our vineyard, and so we keep all that just as our estate, and then of course we get grapes from the high plains and the hill country as well. But it's I like the Mediterranean coast wines. Grapes, as far as growing those in the hill country, they seem to tolerate the environment pretty well.
Cool. And Mr. Doug Lewis, tell us about what you got going on.
I drinking some Albarino. You guys can see that from Enchanted Rock Vineyard, just north of Fredericksburg. Little hill country wine, small vineyard. It's only a little over 2 acres. I got my start. That's what I'm supposed to talk about, right?
Yeah, just tell us who you are for anybody. I mean, most people might know, but then again, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Doug Lewis with Lewis Wines. I started a small winery back in 2010 while I was in college working for David, who's the guy who's just talked to me. And I've been doing Lewis Wines ever since.
Yeah. How many acres of vines do you guys have right now? Like the both your estate stuff, but then you guys manage?
So we got the estate vineyards getting close to 8 acres now that's in production. And then Round Mountain's a little over 6 acres. And those are the only two that we lease Round Mountain. So those two are directly it's just us, our management. Then I have another grower that I work with a lot, kind of on a consulting basis. I don't get too physical, but I try and steer them in the right direction.
Yeah.
And then we got a lot of people we work with during harvest or during the growing season if need be. Some of our growers are pretty small, get a little short-handed sometimes.
No, for sure. Cool. Yeah, and so I'm David Kuhlken. I got in this business because my parents planted back in 1995, and version 1.0 of all of that for us was planting Cab, Merlot, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc. Most of that's gone. 2007 time range, I got into the business more directly, and at that point we planted Tempranillo, Touriga Nacional, Mourvèdre, Grenache, a little bit of Albarino a couple years later. We also have Tentacao, Tinta Amarella, and then most recently we planted Petit Syrah and some additional Sangiovese. And we've been, like I said, we've been managing that 17 acres really. That's been the full size since 2007. We do work with other hill country growers, but we only have one other site these days that we manage mostly ourselves, and that's a Seco Monod vineyard, which is over off of 965, kind of a little south of the Enchanted Rock vineyard that Doug's talking about. But yeah, I mean, and that for us, that's about a quarter of our overall winery program. The remainder being other hill country vineyards and then high plains growers. So we're only growing about a quarter of the fruit ourselves in our own managed sites. So that kind of gives us the range of everything that's in our wine program, with Tempranillo clearly being the big piece. That's about half of the estate vineyard these days is Tempranillo for us. So anyway, well, cool. Well, I mean, guys, talk about the 2020 vintage so far. I mean, how the winter was and how things are looking. What have you guys been doing so far? Kind of kick it out to anybody who wants to jump in and start talking about what this year is looking like.
I'll jump on it. I'm in love with 2020. It's been a huge relief and very, very pleasant vintage compared to 2019. 19 being an El Nino, a really, really wet season, had like 30 inches of rain and a hailstorm July 9th that lasted about 10 minutes. A lot of things you don't want to have happen. In 20, we haven't had anything like that happen to us yet. So, knock on wood, it's already off to a much, much better start. We're done shoot thinning one vineyard. We're pretty close to done shoot thinning around Mountain, and to be finishing canopy management before May is new for us on 14 acres. So we're feeling pretty good about life right now. We did start pruning January 2nd, so that got us a good head start on things. But we had a little bit of a scare. I probably deal with it more than most. Maybe Doug Reed could talk about this too, because he's pretty far east. But I work with a lot of Spanish and Portuguese varieties that bud fairly early, and we had a really, really warm winter. And we had bud break in the third week of February, which is scary. We had a very close call with freeze, which was scary, but we didn't get hurt. We made it through, and we're looking at, at least for my estate vineyard, it's on its 7th leaf now. It looks like could be one of the best vintages in the vineyard's short life so far. So Round Mountain looks great. It's one of those years where you get like enough rain. We haven't irrigated this year. Nutrition looks great. I mean, it's kind of one of those years you feel like nature's working with you.
Cool. Yeah,
I would agree that this year has definitely been a pretty good year to start with. A little bit of a scary start in that, we had bud break really early. We were first, the Sangiovese was bud break about mid-February. Which is kind of crazy, but being up on top of a hill, we're about 1,100 feet here, and what's more important is we drop off to a creek bed. Dead Man's Creek runs to the bottom of the property, so we drop about 220 feet down to the creek, and that drains into the Pedernales River. So that allows these cool nights that we get, in the spring here, that are the ones that bite you from a frost perspective or freeze perspective. We dodge those pretty easily because of temperature wise. But we're probably about halfway through bloom on Sangiovese, which is crazy at this point. Really, really pretty nuts. But I would agree with Doug Lewis from the standpoint of it does look like a really pretty vintage. Everything will stay together. The had a do a little bit of mitigation for some of the. It was about 2-3 weeks ago. We had kind of a not so much rainy, but kind of a foggy period that we had to kind of work our way through to make sure we didn't get issues with black rot or other funguses. But it so far we've made it through stuff pretty well, and I think heading down a really good path. It's kind of crazy because the Sangiovese came out really early, and the Mourvedre has kind of drug its feet a little bit. So we're just now coming out on Mourvedre.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What about you? Yeah.
We just kicked our irrigation on for fertilizer and imidacloprid reasons. I mean, we haven't had to do anything really other than because of that. And versus last year, I mean, what Doug was saying, that rain was unbelievable. I mean, we were planting. We just eventually said, screw it. We started planting in the rain. I mean, we couldn't. We were knee deep in mud, man. We couldn't. We had to do it. I mean, we had the 45,000 last year. We just had to plow through it with a planter that was, you'd be lucky to do 2,000 in one day. So we were having to really press it. But this year, man, I swear, we planted, and then it rained the next day. And then we waited, we planted, and then it rained the next day. So it's been perfect this year. So I'm just waiting now for everything that's bigger, the Tanat, everything just to blow up so I have an excuse to bust out the Pelunk and just hedge everything. So, I mean, this year has been, the 3 years I've been, somewhat doing this. I mean, this year has been way better and easier to work in than last year. I mean, we're plowing along, man.
And I did walk out there today, and our Tanat has bloomed, and so has our Albarino. So just kind of keeping an eye on our more established vines that we have that we will get a fruit off of this year. Those are the two varieties that are ahead of all the others.
Yeah, by far.
Cool. Mike,
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, we started working in the vineyard, getting ready for spring in December because of last year, all the rains and stuff. So it's like, I am not going to get caught. I did not want to be behind. So it's been wonderful this year. It's like the vineyards never looked this pretty, which it's been just a joy. I put in imidacloprid this past weekend, turned on the irrigation, put a little bit of micronutrients in with it, just to give it a little boost. I was actually hoping we were going to be getting rain to really soak stuff in well. But the nicest thing about this year, the growth on all the vines, it's like textbook. You've got about 2 inches, 2.5 inches between all the nodes. Last year, you'd have like 6 inches. Things were growing. It was like Jack and the Beanstalk time. It was just absolutely nuts. So to see a nice control, even growth, it just makes life so much easier. Especially, we've already shoot thinned half of the vineyard. We were getting ready to raise wires on the other half, and it's just nice working at a pace where it's comfortable and you're not reacting a week and a half afterwards because you couldn't get in because of all the rain. So it's definitely a nice change of pace.
Well, man, send your guys my way. Dang, it's crazy. We are nonstop. I'll work them in it's legal.
Yeah, and Emily and Chase, like, how many acres are you guys putting in this year? I mean, how many new plants this year?
55,000, so that about 50 acres.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot of ground.
Man. I mean, we have a good team. I mean, and we wouldn't be able to do it if it wasn't for the machines that we've got. I mean, honestly,
our crew is incredible. Like, they move so quickly and efficiently, and we all know we couldn't do without your employees. So
yeah,
but I mean, but once everything, tying, that's going to be backbreaking, and we're just not dipping into that, but we would be able to do it if it wasn't for mechanization. I mean, I know people, I don't, controversial, whatever, but like that is the reason we are going to be able to plant 140 acres.
Yeah.
We just would, obviously. I've been 2-row. I have a 2-row weed sprayer I've been messing around with, and my pumps breaking and this and that. But man, that 2-row weed sprayer, oh
So
my
much better than holding a
gosh!
little hand wand. And,
My first year, 3 years ago, I have 7 brothers and sisters, right, and my mom and dad, and we planted 4 acres of cab, and we didn't know shit about anything, right? Okay, and so we go out there, auger the holes, and we're scooting on our butts, planting, and it's about halfway through it, and we're like, maybe we should find some people that can do this because this is kind of tough. We're going to need to find some help. And little did we know, it's hard to find help in Fredericksburg. I mean, so that's why we immediately started going towards what machines and what can we find?
Sure.
So that's why we are now, we're gearing up and building all our vineyards strictly for using machines.
Yeah.
The time and
well, and that scale, that makes sense. Yeah, no, we're planting, I think 3 acres this year, but we are in the category of that is all by hand. So, and it's been, to that degree at least, it's like it's kept everybody busy, which has been a useful thing this time of year and with the situation, because tasting room, production that's not kind of doing their thing, they're out there digging holes and putting plants in and doing all the others, because I'm not going to hire a crew at this point. I got one internal, and they don't have as much to do. So it's actually been kind of, and that it's been a weird kind of blessing in so much as everybody's gotten a real handle on what's involved in the vineyard this year because they're all out there. So
100%. I mean, we have.
It's exciting too, because like once everything passes and we can all go on fire again, it's going to be neat for them to tell the story. They were a part of the whole process, so I'm excited. Yeah.
So all the guys that people all day and pour wine and just bullshit, go out there and give me that labor. Give you a little respect on what you're pouring.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. Oh, go ahead, David.
No, I was saying, Mike, what are you going to say?
So, we had our tasting room is basically taking over everything that normally I would try to get help on. So I remember everybody after we did suckering, 2 days. Everybody was like 2 days it took them to recover from doing about 1,000 squats or so, And then, and I was like, well, that's just the easy part. Now we're going to go back in. Now we're going to show you some of the more technical aspects as far as, we're going to be thinning, and this is what we're trying to do. And so for a learning aspect, it's one of those things you can hear something, but when you're actually out there and at the end of the next morning when your hand looks like this, because it's like, oh, I've never used clippers for 6 hours. I was like, yeah, that's getting used to, what we take for granted when you work out in a vineyard. And that's just priceless for somebody to be able to relay that information. So, it's going to be wonderful for all the wineries this year for all the stories the good stories that are going to come out of a bad situation.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, there are parts of this that actually can be really good. It will be fun to hear, and obviously I'll be excited about releasing a 2020 vintage down the road, just because I think for almost everybody who's on our staff, they will have had a very direct hand in at least this part of it. And that's awesome. I mean, I know for some wineries, seems like Doug, for a Lewis, you guys have more of your staff kind of gets that anyway. It seems like you guys rotate people out, and people are stepping out in the estate all the time. It's not always true for ours because it's not on site. Our estate's a little further away.
Yeah, everybody who works here has worked in the vineyard at one point or another. There's a few people that work here that outside of harvest won't work in the vineyard. During harvest, everybody works in the vineyard. Literally well, we have one employee who actually really isn't that involved with harvest. I'm a liar, but yeah, I mean, we're a really small group, and we farm. I don't know. I mean, it's a funny thing when we say like, oh, it's this much of our production or whatever. If that's all, I feel like such a question mark over the next year or two, you know, on where growth will go or things like that. But Round Mountain in our place in a good year is easily a third of our fruit, and you know, so that, and there's a couple other vineyards we work with, I guess, and there's 6 other people we work with in the hill country that we might be helping hand harvest their fruit, or just go hand harvest ourselves. So you know, we prefer to kind of move. You know, you get the same people who do it year in, year out, you get a lot faster. We take volunteers where we can get them, but it's really nice to have that kind of same group, 8 people that know what to do. You don't have to explain everything every time. But we like having a crew that, you know, like you guys are saying, it's really great. People can tell stories about the wines and picking the grapes and making the wine, and they're connected to the product. So it's not hard at all for any of them to sell the wines. Yeah. Unless the wine, you know, unless we bottled something we shouldn't have bottled, but we're just trying to avoid that.
Aren't we all? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but speaking of, I didn't actually do what the wine I'm doing right now is our Pedernales, which is off the estate this last year. And I mean, this is one of those ones where it's kind of a story of like when you like kind of work with whatever the vineyard and the vintage is going to bring you. We have like an older Tempranillo block that has been the last few years struggling from a viral infection that probably came in from the nursery stock way back 15 years ago. And it's to a point where it doesn't necessarily ripen up all that well, but for doing Pedernales, it's actually been brilliant. So we harvested this one super early. We actually harvested this out in July, which is not typical for us out of that block if we can help it. But yeah, super nice. Just finally started putting labels on these bottles. We've had this sitting in the cellar for 6 months, just waiting to find out what's in those bins, and mostly good. Caps still on all of these, I think. So anyway, we'll be releasing this probably in another 3 or 4 months. I mean, actually on that question, I was kind of curious, like for you guys, because I think like everybody on this list, well, I don't know about like at Hawk Shadow, but for most of y'all work with both High Plains and Hill Country fruit. And I mean, in general, like if you were trying to describe to consumers what sets Hill Country apart, what kind of things would you point to about the wines and the vintages you've worked with out of your Hill Country fruit?
So
I think go ahead.
Go ahead, Doug. Age 4 beauty.
Anyway, it's my thought on that is I think the Hill Country seems to reflect, I think, a little more European character in the wines out of the Hill Country and the grapes that we get than, for example, West Coast, where High Plains tends to be a little bit more of that kind of more of a West Coast style to it. But I think the earthiness, you get a little more mineral content, you get again a little bit more of that European characteristic that drives the more Hill Country type of fruit.
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing, I've gotten Tempranillo from 3 different vineyards in the High Plains and finally settled in on one. And when we had our first harvest out of the estate, it was like night and day. First off, the chemistry was better. Our yields were lower, so probably 3.5 tons to the acre. And the flavors were so much more. When I think Rioja, or if I think of Tempranillo, the Hill Country matches that to a degree that I think the high plains can't touch. The high plains, I think, is a little bit more delicate where for our stuff, I don't know if it's the warmer temperatures or, you know, how the limestone truly affects, but it has a depth of character that I really enjoy. In fact, when I first opened our 17, and I was just so emotional because I wanted something that said Texas, and I gotta do a shout out for Doug Lewis, because the reason I have a vineyard was from Doug and Chris, but mainly Doug Lewis talking. And I apologize to my wife every spring for all the crap that we do in the vineyard. Last Valentine's, I got her a new pair of pruning shears. They had red hand. And she's like, "What the F are you giving me this for?" I was like, "I love you, and I know you hate that vineyard, but this is a labor of love. Just like, you know, if any of y'all are married, you know, it's a labor at times. And the more you put in, the more you get out of it. So
Wait, did you
just
give her
kudos
a
to you,
pneumatic?
Doug, because you drove me to hell no.
Oh, no, just, I was saying, because that's like,
No.
if you really love her and you want her to take care of her, I guess you'll give her pneumatic ones, so.
No. You never give a woman something where she could just tear crap up.
And we got those for the first time this year, and that is a life changer for your hands, I have to say.
Y'all like them, Dave?
As a woman, I'll
Yeah.
say that's fine.
Yeah.
I think he cut more wires than I did, so.
Yeah, that is the downside is, yeah, wear good gloves, watch out for the wires, because,
And your fingers.
Yeah.
yeah.
Make sure you keep all your fingers when you're done. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's good stuff.
You like secretly 55 over here teaching Batek. God dang. 28, 30 years old.
Hey, what's that poster behind you? It's like kind of blurry to me, but I've been wondering.
It's a world
But
map.
behind me?
Yeah, behind
Star
you.
Wars?
That is episode 7, Stormtroopers, Phasma, and I have a cousin who does flat stock art, and so that is from their work they did on episode 7. So, but yeah, good stuff. I'll get you one. It's good.
Very, very cool.
So, Doug, what about you guys? Or just in general, because you've had, as far as growers over the last, whatever this is now, like almost 10 years, you've had a lot of experience with hill country fruit, and you can compare it a good bit to high plains. What do you think?
Yeah, so 19 was 10th vintage for me. And I've definitely bought grapes from way too many people and probably too many grapes. So felt like I've kind of been all over the place, one degree or another. But man, what's the difference in 2 wine growing regions 300 miles apart from each other? Fucking everything. Excuse the language, sorry. But for the hill country, obviously we get 10 inches, 12 inches more of rain a year than they do. And that makes a big difference. I could start splitting hairs on like the east and west hill country. I think Mason's more like brownfield than it is like where I'm at in some ways. But that, again, another conversation. Ultimately, the high plains, the majority of the sites I've worked with out there are very deep soil profiles. And when they have good moisture over the winter, like in an El Nino, that profile tends to fill up with water. And then they, if you're eliminating most of the competition in the vineyard and stuff like that, the plants have, unchallenged access for that water. You get incredibly productive vines. And I think that might be one thing, like what Mike was talking about, the difference between his estate Tempranillo. I wouldn't argue that hill country is a better place to grow Tempranillo, but I would argue that low vigor vineyard site is a better site for Tempranillo than a really high vigor site. And I might be partial to Neil Newsom's Tempranillo, over most hill country because he has a really shallow, low vigor site. But by the time you get east over to brownfield or something, you know, it's like Mike said, you get 6-8 ton crops that, you know, for Tempranillo, that's just not how it works.
Yeah.
So that to me, that's one big difference, is kind of the productivity. I remember when I first started learning, first year I worked in your vineyard, you told me vineyards in the hill country, for the most part, should make about 2.5 tons to the acre. You know, and obviously I think some sites can push for 4, and some probably shouldn't make more than 1. But I do think that the hill country tends to be lower vigor sites unless you get down in deep fertile soil by the river valleys, or, you know, right by the rivers. If you're up on hillsides to avoid freeze, which I think is a smart thing, you tend to have moderate to shallow soil depths, which result in lower vigor. Which helps with a variety like Tempranillo.
Yeah, I mean, like, and that's a really great point, because like when trying to describe hill country, we struggle with this sometimes because it varies so incredibly widely by site. You know, we've got like our site that's up on 965. It's really vigorous. It's like kind of lower down in the valley, and then, you know, you just go and, you know, like across our estate. I mean, we have 2 different sites, and then like we're spread over several different like sort of substrates as far as what's underneath. And I mean, it is such a wide range. Like, we've got Tempranillo in 3 different spots, and those are characteristically different. And when we're trying to explain that to consumers, it's like, it's a little, I mean, like not entirely, but a little easier to generalize about high plains, because the differences are in a narrower range. But like when we're talking about hill country, I mean, like I think of like, you know, Hawk Shadow, y'all site, that's a very different site than say like that Enchanted Rock vineyard you guys have, what that Albarino is. And I mean, and across the hill country, you can find a lot of different, you know, setup soils and everything else.
Yeah, our soil here is really, I mean, we virtually have no soil. So yeah, for as far as production wise, we're at about 1 ton to 1.5 tons an acre. So it's really low yields, but it provides some really, really pretty character in that fruit.
Yeah, and I liked what you were saying about minerality, because I mean, we get that, I think, with almost all Texas fruit, but it's a really unique component in at least most of our hill country. Like it really comes forward. I mean, one of the things I like about having hill country is just, it's like growing the same varietal across the hill country, you can really bring out a lot and do a lot of blending across vineyards sometimes, because of just the different notes that you get based on these different sites. I mean, I think some of the stronger wine programs sometimes are just ones where it's like you've got multiple sites you're working with, and that really gives you a good range when you're talking about what you work with in the winery.
I think that's what's so exciting about wine in general, is we get to play with high plains fruit as well as hill country fruit, and some varieties that don't do well here do amazing up there, and vice versa. So it's kind of exciting to get to show how big of a range we have in Texas whenever consumers come.
For sure.
And this might be a newbie, but so why does the high plains, I mean, why do they have such a significant amount more, you know, acreage when it comes to grape growing? Is it because they're significant, you know, they're already farmers, or is it because we're raving about hill country fruit, you know, the differences, but you know, we don't even compare ratio wise to what they're growing up there. So I mean, we're, you know, hill country's picking it up, but you know what, you know, why is that? Do you guys?
I'd like to answer that. I think there's the biggest reason, besides what you just said, that a lot of the people up there are already farmers and looking to diversify into a crop and vines is really suitable for where they are. But the other thing is there's no competition from urban areas for real estate. You know, the hill country, you guys are aware of. I mean, you can pay anywhere from $5,000 to $30,000 an acre. And the high plains, when I started in the high plains or in the wine industry, I can remember looking at land in the high plains that was less than $1,000 an acre, and it was irrigated, like had water already. So to me, the cost of getting in the business is much higher in the hill country, especially when you consider that the vineyards are lower productivity in nature in a lot of instances. I would say that I feel like the minerality that people are talking about It is something that I find really prevalent in all Texas wines, especially Hill Country. I don't necessarily think like the Hill Country has more minerality than the High Plains per se, but I think a lot of the vineyards in the High Plains are planted in places that have been farmed for the last 70 years. Whereas in the Hill Country, sometimes we're planting vineyards in what was a forest 5 years ago. So you have a very, very different biology in the soil, a different amount of organic matter available to the plant, and plants react to what they're growing. So if the soil is different, there'll be differences accordingly. I think another important thing to distinguish with the Hill Country too is we mentioned limestone, and that's definitely like a reality from my estate vineyard around Mountain Doug Reed's vineyard. Probably most of us in the Pedernales River Valley are dealing with some sort of clay or sand soil, either alluvial or residual, but limestone derived. And as soon as you get into the Llano uplift, everything changes, right? You're into granitic soils, you've got sand, you've got all sorts of cool stuff. And I think all of that has yet to even be played out or felt out in terms of the differences from that to the Llano River Valley versus the Pedernales River Valley. In my mind, very different. And I think David nailed that point earlier when he said a lot of the growers in the High Plains, their vineyards are very similar to each other. Sometimes you go to a vineyard 7 miles down the road and it has pretty much the same soil type and depth as the last vineyard you were at. And you just don't see that in the Hill Country because of the topography.
Yeah. I think another thing is up there, because of their inherent large-scale farming, they are driven by mechanization. And in the Hill Country, I think you see a lot more touch labor. It's a little more expensive, but you have, the terrain makes it difficult to sometimes do mechanization. So I think we have a little bit more hand harvesting, a little more touch on fruit than up in the High Plains, which is really driven by mechanization.
Yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt. For us, I remember Penny Adams back in the day when I was first starting out. She goes, Mike, the best thing anybody can do if they're growing grapes is you have to walk them. You have to walk the vineyard. You have to be in there. If you don't know what's going on, you don't know what needs to be done. And for us here, I wake up every morning. First thing I come out my door and I see the vineyard. That's, it's a focus. So same with you, Doug. You come out of your door. What do you see? It's like you're there.
Walk out the front door. It's there. So
yeah. Yeah, it's also a focus issue where, and then I don't have 100 acres. So for me, it's, this year with the coronavirus and everything that's happening with tasting room closing down, I'm not getting very much High Plains fruit. I've got everybody working and keeping my payroll going. So my emphasis is going to be pretty much on my estate. That's going to be 2020. That is my fruit. That is where our effort and everything's going. So I might get a few things from the High Plains, but I'm talking a tenth of what I would normally purchase. And because I want to focus on this and what circumstances are directing me to. So I know everybody's in the same boat right now, just waiting to hear what's happening Monday as far as being able to open up, and because there's no war chest of sales to purchase fruit this year.
So I think it's funny that you're commenting about the walking the vineyard, because I can't wait to see how good a shape that Emily and Chase are going to be in walking that many acres.
There you go.
You guys are set for the next 20 years.
Those guys got to be cruising, man. They got some ground to cover.
I know. You're going to have a high pace because, yeah.
It was like 2 years ago. We were, at Le Bonvi at the end of every day, we were managing like 4 acres. Yeah. And we would grab a bottle of wine and get on the 4-wheeler And we would drive in fields that are now covered in vines. You can't ride a 4-wheeler through the middle of them anymore. But I don't know, it's kind of cool just to
Well,
look
and when we
back
first
on
came
that.
up here, so before this, my family, we lived in San Angelo for a while, and we had a ranch, and we were going to do the whole, exotic game and, high fence and did all that. And we actually ended up moving all 400 heads of cattle over to La Bonavie, and that's only 240 acres, so we had cows everywhere. I mean, everywhere with no vines, so we had some great fertilizers, I will say, 'cause you couldn't move anywhere without stepping in shit. and then just, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure everybody's heard, but either way, man, we were like, oh, well, let's, we live in Gillespie County. Y'all should plant some grapes. Well, we're from Midland, Texas, we're from oil, but we know everything about growing grapes. So let's do that, So, I mean, we just, I don't know, things steamrolled, and I'm sitting here on this Skype with you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think Emily nailed it really well. Is that like over the years, we have things that we would prefer to grow in the hill country because those varieties, they just really, this is a better environment. But there are things that we get from the high plains that I would always prefer, just given their diurnal shift, given the soils, given everything else. Those varieties are really suited to that region. Yeah, and I mean, I think actually be sort of curious, like as we sort of, we're getting near the end here, but like, I have my list, but I'm kind of curious with everybody, like, what is it in the hill country that in particular you really love about growing here? Like you want to grow in the hill country because that variety really suits you for what, you like in your wine program.
Whatever baby vines stay alive. That's what I like.
I mean, the crazy thing, I put Rafosco in, and I want to do a red sparkling from it. I'm going to do it pet nat style. I was eventually or initially thinking I was going to have to go to Texas Custom Wine Works and do a forced carbonation, but we've done a couple of pet nats, and now we pretty much got it dialed in after, I don't know, about 15 trials, and I'm just jazzed because it's like I want to do something different that Doug hasn't done, or you haven't done, David. So well, I mean, you got a little bit more gray hair. I think I'm about as old as you, or older, but
I know it's hard to tell. I am all gray here at this point, so I could be in a pretty wide range, huh?
But I was over in Napa for in February before everything, just got clamped down. And we're trading wine, going to places. We do 100% Petit Verdot, and people were just going gaga because they'll do 5%, 10%, in their blends and stuff with their Cab and Cab Franc. And they're like, you make 100% Petit Verdot? I was like, oh, I do a lot of cool stuff that you can't do. So just wanted
no one's going to tell Mike Batek what to do.
No. But it's also the great thing about the Texas industry. I mean, we are pretty much, cowboys in the modern sense of the word, trying to define where Texas is going to be defined, what's going on. And, we don't have boundaries just yet. So it's a very exciting time, exciting to have, all the acres being planted, because y'all are young, y'all can do that crap, because my wife would divorce me if I was putting in like 20 acres. There would be papers on the side of the bed when I woke up in the morning.
Y'all are still way too young. I've got a good 5 to 10 years, most of you. So it's kind of crazy, but I do think Petit Verdot. Speaking of Petit Verdot, that's one of the things that I think really does well in the high plains, where like Sangiovese and Tempranillo are doing more of that hill country focus. But some Verdot for the Highlands is just incredible.
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
And I was going to ask, I mean, so next year we actually ordered 5 acres or so of Petit Verdot. I mean, if you guys were to do it over again, order another 10 acres worth of vines, I mean, what would y'all order? Knowing what you know now, and, you know, doing what y'all done and seeing high plains and, you know, hill country, what would you guys have ordered, you know, if you were planting in
First of all, I'd probably order it and send it to you to plant, because it sounds like you guys could manage it a lot better than I could. So if we can work that out, I'll get the vines and they'll be coming to your address. So
I think we were staying up to like 4 a.m. the first day over at the, what was that? Either way, you're up in the hotel room, man. We were drinking till like 4 a.m. So I think I have your number. So I'll text you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I don't know. I would I do like Petite Syrah these days, but I've always liked Touriga, and I don't know. I mean, that's one we've had. I know, Doug, you've had for as long as you guys had anything in the ground. Touriga Nacional, not a good yielder, but I mean, it's a perfect match for the hill country, because it's just the intensity, the aromatics you can get from that. I mean, I'm not worried about yield in a place like the hill country anyway. So, I mean, it works out nicely. So.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I want to ask a question about rootstocks. Sorry.
Wait, Doug, what were you going to say?
Yep. You're all good. Go ahead.
Okay, to add to his question, what rootstock would you put it on? Because, like, I've seen a lot of 1103P, and I don't know if that's like a thing that somebody came in and was like, yeah, plant everything on 1103P. You know,
Yeah.
I just want to know, like, add on to the question.
I think a lot of that is just soil type.
I'll take a stab at y'all's question. So if I was going to plant 10 acres and what rootstock would I use? It really depends on where. You know, if you're on bench land with deep soil, I'm going to use a different rootstock than I would on the top of a hill with no soil. So that, you know, for me, like, it depends on where you're at. I don't know your site very well, so I couldn't speculate. But if you have, like, I don't know, some sort of crumbly clay that's at least a couple feet deep, seems like 5BB's been pretty good to us in those kind of soil types. As far as the varieties go, wine, I think it's so important to know what kind of wine you're trying to make first, right? Because, like, if you're trying to make a sparkling wine, I don't think I'd plant anything that's sugared up really fast. Or if you're as far east as I am, I wouldn't plant Grenache, because it hates the humidity. And you heard what Doug Reed said about three weeks ago, we were living in a cloud like that, you know, at a wreck, on disease and stuff. So it all depends. Like, your soil drains really well. I would plant some varieties that maybe you know, push the envelope a little bit more on not being as disease resistant. So, like, the thicker skin, the better. And I agree with Dave wholeheartedly on Touriga. It's a thick skin, a small berry. Like, that thing, when that stuff's ripe, the bunches a lot of times aren't closed up all the way. And so you're getting extra disease resistance out of that airflow through the cluster. And then Touriga, man, it's just like every bud pops where it's supposed to. It's even. It's like makes like the same thing every year for me. You know, it's very predictable. It's consistent. It doesn't fluctuate much. Like Tempranillo, because the Touriga clusters are so little. Like, the variability is so small. And, you know, Tempranillo, like, the difference at Round Mountain Vineyard between, like, a La Nina and an El Nino is the difference between red and rosé wine.
Yeah. My crew would not say the same thing about Touriga Nacional. They all pretty uniformly hate it for just, but the outcome is really good. So, yeah.
What is it? Real vigorous at y'all site, Dave?
Yeah. But we actually have crept up to right around 2 tons an acre, and I mean, that's fine from a productivity. Yeah. It's just that, like for Tempranillo, you would pick, like, you know, I don't know, 15 clusters a plant to get that. For the Touriga, you'll probably pick 50, because I mean, they're all just.
I've got this down pretty good for us to harvest. Like, my same crew, same guys we're using regularly. Myself included. Maybe we're all getting slower because we get older, but it takes about 80 hours to harvest an acre of Touriga, and then that's in the dark. So, you know, maybe a little faster. Say that again.
I said, you take me up, I'll do it in an hour.
Dude, you guys, by all means, man, bring that harvest. The only problem is we got an acre to do. You know, you got to bring it all the way down the road to run it for 30 minutes, and then you got to, you know what I mean? More time moving.
I did it all last year, man. That's all I did.
Well, I need to get your number. Man, I'll tell you, like, in a nice year, we get enough gaps, you know, between varieties that we can just pick every other night, and we're on top of it pretty much. But goddamn, 2018, Nino, we had like six weeks of high pressure, no rain leading up to harvest. We picked grapes 20 nights in a row and didn't get everything picked in time. You know, it sucked. But where I was going with that, 80 acres for Touriga or Albarino to harvest, 80 hours to harvest the acre by hand, whereas like Tempranillo is more like 35. So like we could harvest 2 acres of Tempranillo faster than we could harvest an acre of Touriga. So yeah, most labor don't like that. I remember working at Dave's back in the day, and we were paying people by the bucket on how, you know, so like if you work faster, you make more money, right? And like just had to give everybody like a flat rate wage on Touriga day.
Yeah, no, we do that.
Let's go do it. Yeah, we'll do the Touriga. Okay, y'all go over it.
So by the way, I've been negligent on questions that people have been asking, but we'll get this last one before January comes back on. The question was, who has the best beard here? Doug or me or Chase? So
Not you.
Oh, beard.
I'm gonna say
Not
Mike.
you.
That's just nice.
I'm deferring to Chase or Dave on this, man. I got pretty trash beard over here.
What? Like I don't. I think my computer's a little off.
yeah, but I'm like a beard tourist. So this is like the second time in my entire life. And when the tasting room opens back up, this is going away. So.
That
Batek, yeah, the Batek face. Yeah, there we go. That actually might win this for me. Batek, if you would wear that to an actual official event with it tied off in the front, yeah, I've got prizes for you.
Okay, that will be the next meeting that we can actually attend.
Exactly. We'll celebrate.
Can I get that in writing?
Y'all know how I feel about beards, so I'm real glad I missed that conversation.
Well,
hey, January, welcome back.
Chase, one thing.
Here,
Oh, go ahead.
Enjoying 2 rosés, one from Driftwood Estate Vineyard right here down the road in Dripping Springs, and then one from Croson Wines, which is from Granite Hill, and just laughing at you guys and loving your interaction tonight. So I really appreciate all of you coming on with us for Hill Country Happy Hour again.
We're done?
We're done. This is it. That was an hour. That was the whole hour
right there. No, I want more now.
We should do it again.
Yeah.
You guys.
Yeah, I'm not even through with what I want yet.
I don't know.
Thank you all so much, and thank you viewers for watching. We hope that you will join us again next week. We have a group of High Plains growers next week. We have the Bingham Family Vineyards group, Farmhouse Vineyards, and Lost Straw Cellars, all moderated by John Ravenberg. So we look forward to having you next week. And in the meantime, you can definitely check out our THCW Facebook page, which you all should be on now. Or our website, which has a link to a resource where consumers can find information on how to get wines curbside or delivery, you know, in your local area, shipping deals, wine deals, how you can connect with your wineries at this time. We hope that you'll be able to come back and visit soon, but like everybody has said in the last few days, we will know more on Monday. So I guess we'll wait till then. But we will see you here next week, same time, same place. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.